Welcome to a short preview of this Screencasts Online video tutorial.
This week, we're going to learn about an iOS app called HashPhotos from Beyond F. This application is for iPad, iPhone, and iPod Touch. Think of HashPhotos as a way to augment Apple Photos. It works on your existing Photos library, but brings unique capabilities that simply don't exist in Apple Photos. You don't have to choose between Apple Photos and HashPhotos because they work together, allowing you to have the best of both worlds. Most of the features of HashPhotos act on your Apple Photos library directly. So if you create albums and folders, for example, in HashPhotos, they show up in Apple Photos. Edits you make to your images are also in your Apple Photos library. HashPhotos is incredibly fast, even on a giant Photos library, making it faster for some things than working in Apple Photos on the Mac. But the real power is in the extra features of HashPhotos, like being able to adjust the dates on photos, add location data, create film strips, and much, much more. HashPhotos is free with in-app purchases. You can try each of the premium features 3 times before you buy. But the pricing is really, really low. You can choose from 6 different feature packs for $1 US each, or you can unlock all of the tools for the grand sum of $3.99. I've done a search for HashPhotos in the iOS App Store. Let's take a look. You'll see that it supports iOS 12 as of very recently, so this app is being kept up to date. Let's download and install HashPhotos. Let's open. And the first time HashPhotos opens, it's going to give you some hints about some things you can do with HashPhotos, but I'll flip past all of these because we're going to talk about them in this tutorial. When it comes up, it shows you some options on how to navigate the interface, but I'll be showing you this, so I'm going to tap away. And now you can see it's ready to take a look at my photos. You will notice that this background may change over time as I'm doing the recording, and I take photos in my personal library. When you first run HashPhotos, it should ask you for access to your Photos library. Because I have installed this before, it has remembered that I gave it that access. By default, your images are laid out in a square format in the grid you see on screen. We can change that to rectangles if you prefer in the preferences, but we'll get to that later. Also notice that we have some numbers here. You see it says 28, 29, and 30. Those are the dates those photos were taken. You can see September peeking out from the upper left. So all of the photos after the 28 were taken on the 28th of September. You can see I have one screenshot taken on the 1st of October. It's kind of a nice little grid view that gives you an idea of when the photos were taken, and you can still see all of your photos. If I tap on a photo, like one of these flags, you'll see it's a live photo and it actually played it for me.
That's just a quick preview of one of this week's Apple-related tutorials from Screencasts Online. Screencasts Online is your premium source of Apple-related video tutorials. All of our members get access to brand new, up-to-date tutorials each week, as well as unlimited access to our entire video archive full of Mac and iOS-related tutorials. You can stream and download all of our videos on your Mac, iPad and iPhone, and even your Apple TV using the members-only Screencasts Online Apple TV app. Membership also includes a complimentary subscription to the digital Screencasts Online monthly magazine, published each month and packed with videos, articles, reviews, as well as hints and tips covering all aspects of the Mac, iPad, iPhone, and all of the other fantastic Apple products. So, if you're ready to start getting the most out of your Apple devices, visit screencastsonline.com today and become a Screencasts Online member.